The winter they abandoned her arrived without mercy, sweeping down from the mountains like a judgment already passed, and by the time the snow thickened enough to erase the road behind them, Eliza understood that whatever place she had once held in the world was gone, because hope was not something the village could afford to keep when fear grew louder than compassion. They did not shout when they left her there, did not argue or hesitate, because cruelty delivered quietly was easier to live with, and as the last cart disappeared into the white distance, she stood frozen at the forest's edge, the cold biting through her thin dress, her shawl no match for the wind that cut straight to the bone. She tried to follow at first, her boots slipping on ice, her voice cracking as she called names she had trusted all her life. But the forest swallowed her words, and soon even her breath felt borrowed. Hunger twisted inside her, but it was the cold that frightened her most, not because it hurt but because it numbed, because it whispered that sleep would be easy and waking unnecessary, and she knew enough about winter to know that was how it stole lives. She walked until her legs shook, leaned against a tree when the world tilted, and finally collapsed into the snow. Her hands pressed together not in prayer exactly, but in desperation, because desperation did not require belief, only need. Time blurred, memories rising uninvited, warm hands braiding her hair, laughter before whispers replaced it, neighbors, faces turning from concern to blame. And when she opened her eyes again, she was slumped against the steps of an old log cabin. How she reached it she could not say, only that something stronger than reason had dragged her there. The cabin leaned crooked against the trees, logs dark with age, snow clinging to the roof and window ledges, and for a moment she wondered if it too had been abandoned. But exhaustion crushed the thought, and she folded in on herself, knees drawn tight, breath shallow, waiting for night to finish what the village had started. She did not hear the footsteps at first, heavy and slow, crunching through snow with the certainty of someone who belonged there, and when the shadow fell across her, she flinched weakly, too tired to scream. Rowan Hale stopped when he saw her, the sack of provisions sliding from his shoulder as disbelief tightened his chest, because people did not appear out here in winter, not alive, not like this, and as he knelt and felt the cold in her skin, something long buried stirred awake. He had lived alone in these mountains for years, a lumberjack by trade and a ghost by reputation, and without thinking he wrapped his coat around her and carried her inside as the storm clawed uselessly at his back. The cabin was dim but warm, the fire alive, and Rowan worked quickly, rubbing her hands, pressing broth to her lips, speaking softly though he could barely remember the sound of his own voice. And as she drifted, between consciousness and sleep, warmth replacing pain, the forest lost its grip on her. When Eliza woke, warmth confused her more than fear, because it felt undeserved, unreal, and when she saw Rowan by the fire, his large frame held back as if he feared frightening her. Panic flickered until she saw his eyes, cautious and kind, and something inside her loosened. He gave her food, water, time, and slowly words came, first hesitant, then unstoppable, and she told him how the village blamed her when crops failed, how whispers hardened into certainty, how pity faded when winter came and supplies ran thin. And Rowan listened in silence, his jaw tight with recognition, because he knew how fear always needed a scapegoat. Days passed, storms pressing against the cabin, and Eliza learned survival again, learned the quiet strength of routine, while Rowan found himself speaking more than he had in years, sharing the story of a family lost to illness and isolation, of choosing the mountains, not out of love for loneliness but because solitude hurt less than hope. Winter raged, but inside the cabin something defiant took root, built from shared meals, shared silence, and unspoken understanding, and Eliza regained color, then laughter, while Rowan realized the forest felt less empty with another heartbeat in it. When spring finally cracked winter's hold and sunlight spilled across the valley, the world returned and with it a choice. But when Rowan offered to walk her back to the village, Eliza refused, her voice steady as she said she would not beg for space. In a world that had decided she was expendable, when the villagers eventually came expecting bones, they found a survivor standing tall beside the man they had feared. And survival itself became the accusation they could not escape, because Eliza's life was proof of their cruelty, and Rowan understood then that saving her had saved something in himself too, something he thought winter had taken forever, and together they stood at the edge of the forest not as rescuer and rescued, but as two souls who had been abandoned in different ways and chose to keep going anyway. If this story touched you, if survival, redemption, and quiet strength matter to you, subscribe to the channel now. because more powerful emotional stories like this are coming, and you won't want to miss what's next.